Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Vale of Whitehorse District Council Scrutiny meeting. It's July the 31st. We have a meeting this evening, a single item agenda to discuss the grant funding affordable housing policy. And I'm very grateful to Councillor Sue Call for joining us in the room and to our officers who are online this evening. We do have other items to go through very quickly. But that's going to be the main substance of the meeting, just that single item. So, welcome in the room. We have Councillor Hayley Gascoigne, Councillor Robert Madison, Councillor Ron Batstone, Councillor Sue Call, representing Cabinet, Councillor Oliver Forder, and Councillor Judy Roberts. And we have Adriana Partridge and Candida Basilio, who are officers this evening. So thank you everybody for coming this evening. I appreciate that the test match has been happening. This has been mentioned. But it's really good to have everybody here. So let's just start with the agenda very quickly. I don't believe we have any apologies for absence, no substitutions this evening. So that's great. So just a couple of comments or just a couple of announcements to make before we start. If we do need to exit the building for a fire escape, come out of the building and turn right, and the fire exits are clearly signed out of that door. I haven't had any notice that we're having any kind of drill or anything this evening, so hopefully we should be undisturbed. I'd like to remind members, or I've been asked to remind members, please, that tomorrow evening we have a corporate plan briefing online. It would be really great, particularly if all the members of this committee could attend that, because it is a standing item on our work plan. So that corporate plan briefing is something that we all do need to be informed about. So please do join that briefing tomorrow. I don't have any other chair's announcements particularly. Is there anything else anybody would like to bring to my attention at the moment? No? Okay. Do we have item 3 on the agenda? Do we have any declaration of interests from members this evening relating to the substantial item on the agenda? No, if that could be recorded, please, that's great. Right, the minutes of the last scrutiny meeting were held. So the last Vale scrutiny meeting was held on Wednesday, the 12th of July, and we held that at the Beacon Portway in Wantage. That meeting, as this one, was open to the public. And that meeting, the substantial item that we discussed was the call-in of a delegated officer key decision, which was the provision of grounds maintenance, toilet cleaning and facility service vehicles. I'd be really grateful if committee members who were present at that meeting could confirm that they're happy with the minutes of that meeting and happy. Agreed. Agreed. Everybody agreed. Lovely. I shall sign those then. Thank you. Want me to sign them now? I'll do them at the end. Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 5, our work schedule. So we have in the meeting pack for this evening, we have a scrutiny work programme which relates both to Vale and to the joint scrutiny meetings that we hold with South Oxfordshire. Several items coming up over the next few months, including leisure centres, the BIFA annual contract performance, the waste contract, community safety partnership, the joint local plan is coming up, car parks, finances, budget setting. We're hoping to hear back about the grounds maintenance vehicles, and then the corporate plan. The joint local plan, I think, is the big item that will be coming up over the next year. And also, we're hoping to look at planning transformation as well at some point in the next 12 months. As a committee, we're all welcome to add items to that work agenda. Is there anybody who's got anything that they would like us to consider now? Councillor Roberts.
I noticed the community buildings that we own by the Vale, i.e. such as the Beacon, hasn't been on the agenda for a while. I was wondering when we might be looking at that again.
I'll happily discuss with officers appropriate timing for a report to come forward. Great to add it to work.
Thank you very much. any other items? Thanks, everybody. So, item number 6 on the agenda. This is a public meeting, as in members of the public are allowed to attend. I would emphasise really that it's a meeting held in public as opposed to a public meeting. But we do not have any members of the public attending this evening, I understand. Obviously, members of the public are welcome to look at our agenda and to apply to speak or to make statements on any items that are relevant to the agenda of a meeting that's coming up. And there's instructions on how to apply to speak to our meetings on the website and in the meeting stages. So to move to the substantial item on our meeting agenda this evening, item 7, which is the Section 106 Affordable Housing Funding Policy. So this is a new version of a policy that has existed for a while. Section 106 monies are provided by developers in various circumstances, and the council then has powers to release those monies for certain purposes. And so our discussion this evening is on a new policy that's being brought forward to the Cabinet and to the Council. And I'm very grateful to Councillor Sue Call, representing the Cabinet this evening, for joining us and to introduce the policy to us. Councillor Call, would you like to introduce policy, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Okay, so the purpose of this report is to recommend a refresh of the policy and process of how the council assesses bids for and awards grants to organisations that bid for Section 106 funds to help the delivery of new social and affordable housing. As outlined in the Housing Delivery Strategy 2022 to 24 that was approved in November 22, the council has ambition to see more truly affordable housing delivered within the district. One way that the council supports this is through the award of grant funding obtained from developers through Section 106 agreements to those who need financial support to deliver qualifying schemes, usually registered housing providers or RPs or community land trusts, CLTs. The council has existing guidance and a process which can be found on its website. However, as identified within the strategy and as experienced by officers, there are several areas within the current application system which would benefit from updating and amending in order to ensure a more streamlined process with clearer parameters which both address the council's requirements and support applicants. Therefore, officers have developed a new policy and process document which aims to ensure that those who wish to bid for funding are clear of the information required in advance of submission. It also more clearly outlines the process and the commitment that the council gives to providing initial responses, as well as how it will make a formal decision. The proposed policy sets out the criteria that officers will use to assess a bid, although it can be fully prescriptive as each proposed scheme shall be different. It also sets out the objective scoring scheme using their criteria as outlined. A specific reference should be made to the comments on low carbon housing and our desire to see houses be built which are both affordable and low of energy usage and cost for those who live in them. Officers will ensure that RPs and CLTs are aware of this change in policy with the aim of maximising interest in their bids. There will also be a process to review the performance of this new process with the existing process, and this will be brought back to scrutiny in the new financial year. I hope that this report and the proposed new policy and process will meet the aim of getting more affordable and social houses built in the district.
Thank you, Councillor Call. Do any of the officers present online want to make any comments on the report before we go into any further discussion?
No, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. I should note that online we have our officers, Suzanne Malcolm and Paul Fielding from the Affordable Housing team. Thank you both for joining us. And thank you for all your work putting this together thus far. So who would like to, I think one of the key questions that we mentioned in advance of this meeting was that we asked for a little bit more context and detail regarding the figure of £5.4 million, which is stated in paragraph 19 of the report, just so that we could be a bit clearer on what that figure is made up with, or specifically the time limit remaining on available funds, and any geographical limitations that are associated with any specific parts of that fund. Would that be possible, please? Hi, Paul.
Yeah. Hello. Sorry. Yeah, I can give you a bit more information on that. So we've had 43. So the information that we got from finance colleagues, we had 43 payments which have come through, totaling approximately 5.4 million, of which approximately 750,000 has been spent. So the balance of 4.68 million. Of those that have been received, the vast majority have still got more, between 2 and 10 years for which to spend that. We've got 2 that were less than that, and one of those has already been allocated. So that's just to give a bit of information there. And in terms of 2 that we've had recently, so we had the Botley OCLT and Halo Housing, and we looked at the process to understand how long it's currently taking from start to finish, and it's currently taking, each of those 2 examples has taken approximately 10 months from application to come all the way through to payment. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to address, but hopefully that's a bit more information for you.
Thanks very much. Judy, sorry, Councillor Roberts.
Okay, so that left one that is coming up within 1 year, in less than 2 years. How much time is that remaining on that one, and how much is it for?
Hello, yeah, I'm just having a look now. So if you just bear with me 1 second. Just looking at the details. I think according to the data that I've got, it was for £39,000. I think we received. The spend to date looks like it's got at the end of last year, but I'll need to just check exactly what the position is of that one.
Thanks very much. Councillor Gaspar.
Lost my voice a bit, so you just bear with me. I think my question is related to this. 5.4 million, and then you just said about the ones that have drawn down on the money. So there's quite a lot of money left. So do we feel that changing the policy in this way that we're looking at in front of us today is a way to help spend that money? Because that's obviously clearly the problem here, right? We've got such a large amount of money and only a small amount has been actually used. So yeah, so is the problem our policy, or even if we change our policy, are there like lots of developers waiting in the wings ready to do this or not?
My understanding is that it is the policy. It's been, the feedback from previous applicants has been that the policy has been too convoluted. It's just not been clear. And the criteria by which the figures have been awarded has not been clear either. So that's one of the reasons why this review of the policy has been done. So hopefully it's created a bit more clarity in that sense for people who are applying. But to your second question, in terms of are there other people waiting in the wings, my understanding is that the purpose of once we have this agreed, we will be going out to other providers and community land trusts to make them aware of this, and also just trying to raise the profile of the affordable housing potential within the Vale. So it will be something that we will be actively progressing rather than just passively waiting for people to come in. It's yeah, we want to get the money spent, basically.
Thank you. Perhaps would you or one of the officers be able to kind of outline a bit more substantially the differences that have been made between this policy and the new and the older policy, so that we can see where the changes are in terms of.
Look, Chair, would you mind, as we're getting right to the end of the paper, I have questions right at the beginning of it, and I don't know whether now's the time to go back to those, or shall we loop round at the end?
Yes, we will. Let's stick on the kind of overall, rationale for the change of the policy, and then we can come back to.
All right, we'll get to the end and then start again at the beginning. Okay.
I'm going to defer to officers on this topic because I'm afraid I'm not very familiar with the previous policy as it was done, and in use at a time when I was not with it.
Yeah, the current policy is available on our website, and as Councillor Call has said, what we're trying to do is create something that encourages people to bid and to build more affordable housing. We are in an increasingly difficult market in terms of building of affordable and social housing, and we know that through conversation with RPs. So the more that we can make it attractive in terms of bidding for this funding, making it easy and transparent, so that bids that come in, they know what they're having to put in as information, they know the process that we're going to follow, the more likely we believe it is that we're going to get bids coming through. So the existing process wasn't as clearly set out as the one that's proposed, and we've kind of gone through into more detail as to the scoring mechanism, but also laying out the process in terms of how long we would take to respond, and then the process that goes on from there. So it's simply more detailed and more transparent.
Councillor Batson.
Yes, this is on the general financial position. Your report, paragraph 2021, says any council decision must be made with the knowledge of the council's overarching financial position. But this is money which is separate from the general council budget. So why is it affected at all by the council's overall financial position?
I can
now.
so essentially, the financial paragraphs are pretty much a standard that would feature on any paper that has any financial involvement. To just be clear that actually we're being cognizant of the fact that financially in the future we need to be aware of the potential for budgetary constraints. But this one, as you say, if the scheme fails for whatever reason that we approve, then it will become the council's responsibility. So we need to be aware of that and make that a kind of something that is, we put that out front so people are aware of it. Yeah, so in that sense, there would be potentially, absolutely, but potentially a risk to the council's finance. So something that would be necessary to make clear.
Yes, my concern with saying this at this stage is there's a section out in the plan that Section 106 funds are being used by the council for general financial development, as it were, and that they're not being spent within on practical detail. So it's what we need to do is be very clear that this money is to be used for affordable housing and is essentially ring-fenced from the main council budget. I don't think is very clear from these two paragraphs.
Councillor Ford, did you have?
No, that's right. Through the chair, I must admit I'd like to support Councillor Batstone's points. I spent quite a lot of time actually pondering over paragraphs 20 and 21, wondering how they fitted into the overall paper. And I think it's very important that if we have, as Councillor put them, standard paragraphs put in the paper, that it's made completely clear what relevance they have to the matter in hand, because otherwise it's confusing not only for us but for outside readers as well.
We can strengthen that wording to make it clear that the funds are ring-fenced. That there is no potential for people misconstruing the use of those as being in any way inappropriate.
I should probably comment that I should have probably done this at the beginning, that our role this evening is to make recommendations should we see fit to Cabinet, and that we can create a shopping list of those recommendations, and they will be reported back to Cabinet. So I would suggest that these are precisely the kind of things that we feel strongly about, that we agree on, and that these will come back as recommendations to the Cabinet. If they, I'm just going to check my officers that that's. I know. Okay.
At the end, you can summarise at the end what your main points you want.
Okay, so yes, we'll create a shopping list of our recommendations. We'll clarify them all at the end, and then we'll confirm we have the full list at the end of the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Roberts.
Just as a follow-up question to that, I was going to ask: is there a limit, financial spending limit, that the council has to have, so that if you're spending under a certain amount, it can be delegated by officers, and if you're spending over a certain amount, it has to go to full council for approval? I believe there is, and I think perhaps if that information was involved in this paragraph, it might make it more clear of the role. I mean, it may not be the only reason that paragraph is in there, but I suspect it's one of the reasons, because I think off the top of my head it's 250k. But yeah, there is a limit, and anything over that limit has to go through full council for a decision, for security reasons. I have got other questions, but I'll leave other people to.
Do you mind me checking what paragraph that is for the notes?
That's in, well, it is 20 and 21. It's the two we've been discussing. It's not clear as to why it's going to book to council for a fine, for the decision. Because is it just because of the financial limit, or is it going to council because of the idea of making sure it's being spent properly?
Can we hold that thought for a minute, because that's another question which we want to bring up.
Yes.
But I think that there's a relevant financial point there, which is kind of relevant to this financial decision. It's that is there a specific limit whereby different procedures come into to play, and that do we need to make that clear to applicants, potential applicants, as part of the general financial information that we're providing. So perhaps that could go in as part of our general recommendation in terms of the financial information that we're providing. Does anyone have any further comments on the kind of general financial context of
it probably does fall into this actually. Now again, let's start at the very beginning, which I believe is the start of the song. Can I just ask a question about sections 5 and section 6
of our report,
of this report in front of us? And I do apologise if this is because everyone else knows the answers and I don't, but let me just ask the questions anyway. The first point is, it's really how section 106 funding actually arises. Now, my understanding is that developers are in principle obligated to provide a certain amount of affordable housing in every development. And that seems to me to be a good thing, because what we don't want to do is to have ghettos, if you like, of, I don't know, executive housing without any social mix. Therefore, my question is, how does section 106 funding arise? Because it seems to me that when it arises, we must be failing in our duty, because it's only when there aren't enough affordable houses being put in the development, the money is actually forthcoming. So wouldn't it be better if we actually have more applications when we didn't need Section 106 funding, because the actual mix was being put forward? And there's a sort of subsidiary point to that. In particular, in Section 6, paragraph 6, it says, on a small number of occasions, financial contribution may be accepted in lieu of any on-site delivery, and where there is a robust justification for doing so. But I think it would be very helpful, having made that statement, to set out what criteria were being used to actually make the decision that a robust justification exists, because the paper is quiet on that. That was it.
Okay, Councillor Court, or perhaps Suzanne?
Sorry, it took a while to come off mute. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I mean, in terms of paragraph 5 and 6, basically what that's trying to set out is that the Section 106 comes through the planning process. This report is particularly focused on how we use the housing element of the Section 106. And in the most cases, it's fair to say that affordable housing is provided on site, and the planning colleagues work hard to ensure that we do have that mix of housing delivered on site where possible. There are occasions where, as referred to in paragraph 5, there are part units, and that's primarily where most of the money comes from that sits in the housing 106 pot, so they can't produce half of a house, and actually the half of the house allocation then comes into the pot that we're talking about this evening. In paragraph 6, we obviously talk about, on some occasions, that money affordable housing is not provided on site, and there is the money in full comes over to the council to add to the pot. That is a very rare occurrence, I would say. It's only on very occasions where the planning viability argument is justified, and that is something that's scrutinised very heavily through use of external consultants in planning to make sure that what the developers are telling us is true around viability and why affordable housing is not viable for them to deliver on site. Obviously, in those situations, we, as a planning authority, ensure that we maximise the amount of money we get from the developer and make sure that they are paying, so they're not getting off the hook, basically, for not providing on site. They are giving us the equivalent amount of money into the pot, really, on behalf of that development.
Thank you very much. I do think it would be helpful, that, for me anyway, it would have been helpful for me when I was reading it, if there could be some clarification and expansion and the incorporation of the points that Suzanne has so helpfully made.
I feel like that's a discussion that we need to take forward to the joint local plan development as well, to ensure that these kind of...
I do actually. I think with respect, I might be asking the wrong people here, not because they don't know, but simply because it's not their responsibility. But, you know, I suppose it was because in the introduction there were these couple of throwaway comments almost, which I felt required clarification anyway.
I'm very conscious that we've got a pot of money and a policy that we want to make sure that we can spend it. So do we have any more comments on the officer's report?
Could I just comment on follow up from that and in support of Suzanne's comments there? Ultimately, the money that we have, and although I can recognise that it's not necessarily being spent, but that is our intention to very much do that, means that we are not handing a lot of money over to developers to provide these houses for us, because affordable housing in a developer sense only means it's 80% less than the actual market rate that they're selling the rest of the properties for. But obviously, sometimes there have been issues where they've not necessarily kept to the quality standards that perhaps they've been selling the other properties for. So this is an opportunity for us to be able to actually produce some truly affordable housing that actually it's not kind of the majority of which going into developer pockets. It's actually kind of benefiting the individuals who are building the properties for.
Thank you, Councillor Core. I think that's a really good point. I'm really conscious that there's a really excellent scheme just being completed in Botley, and that's precisely the kind of thing that we want to be.
And so I do have another very question.
Councillor Core.
And now we turn to paragraphs 23 and 24. I just wanted to ask whether Section 106 money has remained unspent in the Vale of Whitehorse District Council area, and they had to be returned to the developer, because that isn't stated.
Are our officers aware of any money that's had to be returned to the developer? Please.
I'm not aware that any money's ever had to be returned to a developer.
Okay, I think it would be helpful to state that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Suzanne. That's really helpful. Can we move to the substantial policy now and to making it as good as we can? That'd be great. So to return to a point that Councillor Roberts made about taking these decisions to full council, Councillor Gascoigne, you had a question about the process and about the number of steps that applicants might have to go through to get approval.
Yeah, so it's similar to Judy's point about it. It wasn't clear to me why it had to come to full council, though what Councillor Roberts said has kind of alluded to that, because so you apply, there's some criteria you have to go through, which again, it all makes sense. So the officers look at it, then it's in front of cabinet, goes to cabinet, then it goes to council. There's quite a few steps. So just maybe that's going to slow the process down. So if there's some explanation as to why there's so many steps in the process.
I defer to officers on that.
Yeah, so the process, if I just kind of walk you through, is bidders will submit their bid to us for funding. The purpose of this document is to make sure that there's clarity on all of the information that we need up front, rather than a process of going back and forth to kind of clarify information between ourselves and those that would bid for the funding. Once we have all of that, we make an assessment against the criteria that are laid out. That comes to a score, and then that would come forward for sign off. Now, normally the figures that people are bidding for and the historic ones that we've seen are over a threshold where there would be a decision that could be taken, but definitely by officers. And my understanding is that it would be over the capital threshold that could be determined by cabinet. So that's why it needs council approval. Obviously, if the sums are lower and they can be approved by cabinet, or there's another way that can be approved, then we will take through that. But my understanding is normally because of the sums involved that it has to go through cabinet to get approval, through council, sorry, to get approval.
Thank you, Paul. Shall we, let's start at the beginning of the report and see if we can work through quite systematically. I've got some questions that I'll pick up as we go through that have been submitted ahead. So we're looking at page 1 of our appendix in our report pack, which is page 1 of 10, which is page 16, starting at page 16 of our full report pack. Does anybody have any questions on this first page, items 1 to 4?
Yes.
Councillor Batstone.
Paragraph 3, it said project systems. Basically, it seems to imply there may be money for things other than affordable housing.
Are you referring to these sums are made available
Yes.
for a number of purposes, including to enable the delivery of further affordable housing?
I am, yes. So isn't it just for affordable housing?
Paul?
Yeah, I think what that's referring to there is that Section 106 monies can be received to spend on a whole range of different things, not only housing. Yes, this policy is about how the housing element of that can be spent and how we can spend funding relating to housing, but it is recognising that sometimes that funding can be spent on other amenities for the community.
Yes, I mean, I fully appreciate that. Section 106 money goes to a whole variety of things, but if it's been allocated for affordable housing, surely it should be spent on affordable housing.
Yeah, I'm happy that we can look at just rewording that to have that clarity, if that helps.
Yes, I think so. I think it's about rewording that to explain, particularly for applicants within the Vale, that there's 2 separate streams which they might be looking to apply to. One is about parish and town councils and groups applying for things like greenhouses and sports facilities and astroturf. And then we have a very specific policy related to the construction of new affordable housing. And perhaps that could be clearer in that paragraph. If we can add that to our list, that'd be great. Thank you. I have a question, if you don't mind, about paragraph 4. Project proposals are expected to align with the majority of the key priorities below, and then there's a set of bullet points set out. My question is really, should some of these be required as opposed to desirable? So we've got things like delivers affordable housing. That's obviously required in this policy. Should we be requiring that it delivers affordable housing in perpetuity? So I wondered about whether we need to specify that there are some elements that are essential and some that are desirable and will be scored, but not deal breakers, as it were. Rather than just having a shopping list where you could potentially have a developer meeting the majority of those points and then not delivering affordable housing. Who wants to? Suzanne.
Sorry, it's taking ages to come off mute. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look at that. Obviously, the funding is for delivery of affordable housing, so that would always be a key requirement. We wouldn't be giving it for any old housing scheme to come forward. It needs to deliver that affordable housing, and it needs to be in perpetuity as well. So that they would be givens. I think what that paragraph is trying to do is to refer back to the housing delivery strategy and recognising the needs to reflect the ambitions in that strategy in this policy and trying to tie the two together. But we can probably look at that in terms of streamlining that and tidying that up a bit.
Okay. Thank you very much, Suzanne. Are there any other questions on that first page of the policy? No. Okay. Councillor Gascoigne, then I know that you're interested in looking particularly at the criteria and how they're scored.
Yeah, so when I was reading it, it's good to see the criteria because obviously that gives the people who are applying something to aim at. If they want to be successful, then they're looking at those criteria, which is good. I think for me, it wasn't like there wasn't enough of a definition for some of the criteria. Like it's not that obvious how you would score 0, 1, 2, 3. Does that exist somewhere else? Or I was just wondering, if we could be more specific about, because the criteria, some of them are just like 2, 3 words. So some of it might need more explanation. Like, for example, good housing type and tenure mix. That's like a bit open to interpretation, or it could be.
Yeah, what's good?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I think the idea around this is that the scoring matrix is there to give applicants a general guide. The whole idea, though, is to not make it too prescriptive, because if you do that, then you're actually ruling out potential applicants. And we want applications. We want them from people who are just having a punt just to see if there's something an idea that they've got, and that how can they make this happen. And that's something then that officers can work with and help and guide them and potentially bring something to fruition. Whereas if we were to make it really, really kind of, as I say, prescriptive and too detailed, people might, or applicants might read that and think, well, tick that particular box, and therefore it might put them off. And so by keeping it a bit more general, that idea is that essentially you don't rule people out at the earliest. They don't fall at the first phase.
Okay, so a follow-up question then, in terms of being objective when scoring it. So how do we make sure that, one, because it's not so prescriptive for the reasons you outlined, if I know it's not me, but if I was outlined, if I did it and I went away and scored it, and then Rob went away and scored it, again, we're not the people doing this, but what I'm saying is 2 separate people, would they come to the same score if it's not prescriptive?
I would like to think so, but I definitely the officers who will be doing the scoring.
Yeah, if only our affordable housing team was that big. We have a team leader and quite a small team, so the number of people that are going to be assessing these bids is we literally only have 1 or 2 people doing it, and they would be working together anyway. So I feel confident that we would have consistency amongst the team in terms of that. But the aim is that anything that will come forward will have an outline report of why we would recommend something or not, and the scoring that will go with it, and the key information then would be also available for councillors in making that decision. But yeah, I feel that we've got, the team is small enough that it can be consistent on applying these criteria.
Okay, that's cool.
Just to follow that up then quickly, is this document that we're looking at here, Appendix 1, is this the public facing document that will be provided to applicants?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The idea is that yes, it will. And as I say, you can see the existing information that's on the website, and it very much just looks like an application form. So this information, this is providing more information than they currently have. We may want to tweak it and make it a bit more suitable, but effectively what you're seeing here is what we would make publish on our website for potential applicants.
Okay. So to follow up on Councillor Gascoigne's point, really, I think there feels, and what Councillor Call has just said about the aspiration of this document, it does feel like there's a mismatch between the wording and the aspiration. So we have a sentence which says, project proposals are expected to align with the majority of the key priorities below. And we're looking at, so applicants will be, on paragraph 9, applicants will be required to provide evidence within the application to cover all these considerations. That doesn't feel like, to me, like you're inviting someone to come to you with their idea, which they're not really sure how to get advice on. So I think there's just a slightly kind of, it just needs to be made a bit kind of softer and friendlier and more inviting, like come and talk to us. These are the kinds of things we're looking at. But we appreciate that you're not Sohar or Stonewater or these big registered providers. It might just be a parish council or a community land trust. So I think that's how I would feel. Councillor VOWHDC, did you want to?
Yes, actually, first of all, I wanted to build on Councillor Gascoigne's excellent point about the quite loose descriptions in the criteria. And I was wondering, though I'm quite prepared to be told it's impossible, whether there could be an additional page which actually set out what the criteria are when considering, for example, government structure or good housing time and tenure mix. I'm absolutely certain the officers know exactly what they mean, and I think it might be quite difficult for people to actually understand what they are. And so it'll be something like this: with the government structure, the key points under this are, or something like that, so that would be a bit more helpful. And my second point, which I'm afraid you may hear from me again, and I score always 3 for pedantry, is I do think in a public-facing document, we should avoid undefined acronyms as well. And I see a BFM in there. I'd work that one out. And in fact, in 10A, we have GDV turning up, which is then defined on the following page. And I think it'd be a jolly good idea to define it first before we start using the acronym, really. And I just wonder whether perhaps a really close look at this document would help and sort of put some of these things out in full, particularly bearing in mind, as we say, the type of people who are likely may be looking at it.
Just to pick up on that last point about acronyms, yeah, of course, we can go through and check on any of those. I'm confident that anybody that's going to be bidding through this process will understand what those are, but it is fair enough that we outline them. In terms of support for bidders, we're working with Coho Hub, and we're looking at working with organisations that can support bidders. As has been said, large housing associations don't really need support in putting in bids for this sort of funding, but smaller may do, and it's important that we can direct them to where they can get the best. They can get the best advice. It is difficult for officers to be really prescriptive about what information is required, because every bid is going to be different, and literally we know that is the case in terms of how they're structured, funding, and everything that goes around with the housing scheme that might bid for this. So we're just kind of outlining the areas that we would expect to see information on. The more that we're prescriptive, the more actually challenging it is for us to be flexible when something might come forward that doesn't quite fit into the box that we might have set for ourselves. But we are looking about how we can give some more support for those bidders so that their bid comes in and meets the needs of this policy first time.
Great, thank you, Paul. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I've got a follow-up question about the various things in the matrix. I mean, one of the things in the introduction was specifically trying to have low running costs and low maintenance costs. And then I looked through all these criteria and I thought added social value was about the nearest I could get to that reflects that. And yet I kind of felt that the reason you wanted flexibility is that you want to be able to say something, whatever particularly innovative design they put in actually makes the running cost of this particular project low. And so it may not have all the boxes ticked, but it actually does provide low running costs for the affordable user. And as the current cost of living crisis demonstrates, low running costs are something that's really important to the sort of people who are going to be using this kind of housing. So I just wondered where that would be reflected in the scoring matrix.
The low or zero carbon element of the actual development is the key to actually making sure that they are going to be low cost, ongoing for those people who are living in the properties. Because ultimately the idea is that because they're using low carbon materials, they're also going to be making sure that the property in itself is low carbon. So the emissions that are coming from that, they'll be incredibly well insulated. So the idea is that the actual cost of heating is going to be incredibly low going forward. That's the premise behind it. But if that's not necessarily well reflected in the wording, then obviously that's something that we need to address.
Yeah, if I may, so I totally agree with Councillor Roberts actually. So yeah, you're right, meets zero carbon or better implies low cost. But like, for example, water, it's not to do with carbon. And if you have a system that uses less water, it'll be cheaper for the person and good for the environment, but is not zero carbon. So I think there are still some examples that aren't quite covered in the zero carbon, though it is good to see the zero carbon in there.
There are many different forms of insulation. A varying zero carbon quality and heat quality. So a lot of that's a big balance.
If I may, then I think we'll move, unless any of the officers want to respond to that particular point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm trying to look through the policy now, and if it's not explicit in there, I'm happy to add something in that talks about, we outline the impacts on those that live in the houses. I think that's what everybody's getting at really, is about,
yeah.
We want bidders to tell us what those people that live there, what are they going to experience, whether it's through water usage, energy usage, etc., etc. So I'm happy that we add in a line saying that we would like to understand from bidders what the experience of those that live there will be. Would that meet what everybody's talking about?
Yeah, thank you very much. Which brings me to page 3, still paragraph 9. The key difference in this document for Vale of White Horse and South Oxfordshire is that there's different criteria related to proposed gas heating. And this is a question for the committee as much as for officers and probably for Councillor Paul as well, is do we want to align that so that we have the same policy across both councils? And I'm thinking specifically of our council's own commitments, climate and to carbon and to our performance. I personally don't find that acceptable as a position for Vale, and I would be very interested to find out what others feel about that difference.
Yeah, as a member of the committee, I agree with you. Don't think we should encourage installation of gas boilers and so on. So if it's something we can incorporate in this policy, but I guess the officers or Councillor Cole will tell us there's probably a reason why the South and Vale are different in this report. Maybe it relates to the local plan. But if we can change it, I'd be happy to support you on that, Councillor Coxall.
Thank you. One of the key reasons, well, first of all, let me say, I'm not really cited on the amount of Section 106 funding that's held by the South. So I'm not sure how big an issue this is for South to be able to talk in any way about whether or not the policies are appropriate to both councils. My understanding when this came to Cabinet was it was Vale specific. But I can understand the reason why it would probably be applicable to both. But the reasoning why the gas boiler element is in here is primarily because the full focus of this is about getting the affordable housing that are truly affordable. And what we wanted was for as many people as possible to apply. And that includes people who are currently would have on their initial application or potential application a gas boilers in there. Now the idea is that not that we would then implement that and that we would install gas boilers, but mainly so we could then work with those developers to come up with something that would be much more acceptable than gas boilers, because obviously we know how short-lived they're going to be in terms of how we're going to need to make sure that none of our properties have them. So it's about, again, making the policy as much as inclusive as possible and not restricting people who may apply thinking that gas boilers might be the only option to keep the properties affordable in the developmental sense. So the idea is that we keep it open in that sense, but that we're making very clear that there is weighting to the fact that carbon neutral will be given greater prevalence than any non-carbon neutral applications.
Would it not be the case, though, that they could simply apply for more money in order to pay for the...
We want to get the money spent. At the moment, we've only got 2 applications in. And if there are plenty of developers out there who will currently use, and probably plenty of them do, gas heating, gas boilers for their affordable housing developments, then we need to be looking at potentially inviting them but actually saying, look, everything else spot on, but this aspect of it we simply cannot go forward with. So let's work with you to come up with alternatives that we can use that would actually fit the bill and keep the properties affordable, and then we can go forward with those projects. Because if we just purely stop and say, no, sorry, that's it, you can't come forward with that application, it's totally unacceptable. It's not going to be encouraging for developers who are currently producing affordable homes as they are at the moment.
But that's not what the South Oxfordshire element of the policy is saying. The South Oxfordshire element of that policy is saying any projects that propose gas heating will be automatically given a score of 0 in this category. So you're not saying don't bring these projects forward, you're just saying we're going to score you 0 in this category.
But doesn't that automatically rule them out anyway?
No, because I think you've got a whole bunch of scores which could be between 0 and 3.
The majority of people who are going to be developers are people who are already developers at the moment. And if we are going to get this money spent, the ideal would be that we have these little pockets of lovely affordable homes that are completely carbon insulated and everything, you know, they fit entirely the bill. But ultimately, we may not get to that point. And so being practical, we want to make sure that those people who may apply, even if they have gas boilers on their thing, we would welcome an application, but we would be working with them, as I said previously, to try and affect a different type of heating system that would fit the affordability criteria.
Councillor Roberts.
This is probably a question for the officers, but maybe you can answer it. One of the things I think that would be allowable using this system is if a developer who has currently already developed a housing project, but in this current climate of making it more difficult to sell all the properties, if there were properties that the developer couldn't sell, but that we could buy, well, we could take on, you know, sorry, let's start. The RP that's dealing with that development could take them on and then add our affordable housing money into it to make it drop down to the 80% or 70 or 60 or whatever we can get it dropped down to. Would that be allowable by this policy? And then it would just score 0 under the gas rating. So we'd be able to look at those properties. Thank you, the word out.
If I'm honest, I'm not sure I understood the actual premise.
Well, what I suppose I was saying was, you know, using this money, if we were ever in a position where we were using it retrospectively to taking on properties that have already been built, and then being able to turn them into affordable properties, they may already have gas boilers installed. And I can see that it happened 2009, I think, when there was a financial crash and suddenly an awful lot of housing that had been built was washed onto the open market because the ordinary amounts of people weren't prepared to buy it. A lot of RPs bought up excess housing at that point. And I'm wondering whether this policy would allow us to work with an RP to take on any excess housing that was available and then actually add our money in to make it affordable. But that's why I said the officers might have to answer that. That's complicated.
Yeah, thank you. I think the answer is yes. If we were in that specific scenario, I think it would be important that we were applying the same criteria to anything that we were involved with directly as we were expecting anyone else to. But I think if I understood the scenario correctly, we would apply this policy in the same way. Yes.
You just score it 0 for gas boilers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it just gives it a lower matrix.
I would like to push further on this because I think there is 0 carbon affordable housing being built all over the country. This is clearly possible. Officers clearly consider it possible in South Oxfordshire. I don't see it. What it feels like is that we are being pressured by developers and RPs who are looking at their bottom line and they are saying, we don't want to do it because it's a bit more expensive. I do not feel that it is. We should be setting out the world that we want to see. And for a council that claims to have climate at the heart of everything we do, I do not think it is acceptable to have this difference between the two councils. We've got the same officer working with, on both councils. We've got the same officers team. So I think saying that we still need to put gas boilers in to make things affordable is pressure from the developers that we shouldn't be accepting, because I don't think there's evidence for it. I would be very grateful to hear. Councillor Gascoigne, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so I totally back you on that, Councillor Foxall, because I think if I'm understanding the wording correctly, it's just about a score on one category, and I just counted and there are 26 in the matrix. So I think my opinion would be that we align it, because in reality it doesn't actually stop gas boilers being installed, because maybe they score great on everything else, but it sets out our intent that we do not want to see gas boilers. So I would rather we move to the stronger wording, but in the acknowledgement that I don't think it will stop. My opinion is that it wouldn't stop stuff coming forward, because we haven't said we're not going to have anything that has gas boilers. What we're saying is you will not score on this criteria if that's what you've got. But in reality, there's lots of other criteria, and if they really want to put gas boilers in, they'll just have to bring up their game and everything else. And incidentally, maybe I've missed it. Is there like a score that has to be met? Because this is like, it's got the scoring matrix, but I can't see if there's like and the winning score is this. Maybe I missed
It must be, it's the low, zero or negative carbon scoring. So that's
the overall score, I think, counts.
Yeah, is there an overall score that anything has to meet?
it's the scheme. I think it's the scheme features low, zero or negative carbon, although in the actual matrix the wording is meet zero carbon or better.
Yeah. So that one would be zero. But
Yeah.
what I mean is on every, so I've kind of gone off track a bit, but go back to you and everything I just said. But what is there a score overall that we have that there's
total minimum?
Is it 23 or 26?
Yeah, yes. Okay. Right. Yes.
threshold?
Yeah.
Right. Because
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Gaskell.
I don't think it's in the report what the threshold is.
No.
I might have missed it.
You're correct. There isn't a threshold score in there, and that was deliberately so. And the reason being that there could be bids that score relatively low, but if we haven't got any other bids, councillors may wish to see those bids go forward. Equally, we could have several bids, all of which would score high, and if we said anybody that scores above a certain score was going to get the funding, we might not be able to keep to that. So the purpose of the scoring will be as a recommendation and as a guide that will help members to make that decision as to whether they want to accept. But there'll be a score out of a figure, but there isn't going to be a pass-fail criteria from officers. It's just a guide as to this has scored this many points, and these are the features of the scheme.
Understood. And then to bring it back to the original point, sorry, Councillor Foxall, maybe other members want to agree or disagree, but if we can as a scrutiny make a recommendation that we align the wording with South Oxfordshire, that is something I'd like to see.
So can I just, Councillor Gaskell, you're proposing that you'd like us to take a vote on whether we agree to align our wording with South Oxfordshire as a committee, and whether we recommend that ask Cabinet to implement.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that Councillor Ford has been trying to come in on this discussion.
Yeah, no, that's right. Actually, I have a little bit more sympathy, Chair, Councillor Gascoigne, with Councillor Call and the officers about this one, because I do understand that they're trying to make this open process as well. I actually do think we ought to be aligned with South Oxfordshire, but I think actually what they write is really poorly drafted. So I really don't like the wording they use, because it seems to me the important point is that greater weight will be given to housing scoring schemes that can clearly demonstrate evidence that the resulting scheme will be considered low carbon. Now, if we wanted to add some wording after that, and I'm not drafting this, is gas heating will be used as evidence, or will show that it is unlikely to be a low carbon scheme or something like that. That would be the way to do it. But this rather didactic and statement, which is a sort of detail before the main point, seems to be a rather badly drafted statement by our friends from South Oxfordshire. But that's, and I do think that it sort of might well put people off, actually, especially as when Councillor Call is saying that the idea is actually to move people away from gas DC, but not to discourage them from applying in the first place. That's what I think.
There is an issue as well as in the current economic climate, whereby housing developers of all ilk are really struggling to actually sell their houses that they've already built. And so they're slowing down on any new developments that they're actually going forward with. On that basis, it's not something that we're going to, I would imagine, given where we are at the moment, be completely overwhelmed with applications anyway. And on that, given where we are, I totally agree with Councillor Ford on it, and in terms of the wording. And it's not that I'm trying to encourage gas boilers or gas heating or gas cookers or anything of gas elements at all. However, we need to get the money spent. We've got £500,000 that needs to be spent within the next maximum 3 years, and then the rest of it is something that needs to be spent within that next 10 years. So we don't have the luxury to be able to sit back and wait for, even if we were to be proactive in advertising and encouraging our current RPs, we don't necessarily have that. And my main focus on this whole paper is that we get that money spent and we get affordable houses that are truly affordable.
Sure. Councillor Batson.
Can I just agree with Councillor Ford? I think it is the wording and the fact that it says our projects of gas heating will automatically be given a score of 0 in this category. It's a bit very prescriptive, and I think that will just put people off and they'll not apply.
Okay. I think perhaps this is something that we will need to be coming back to in 12 months' time. If people tell us, I didn't apply for your money because you told me I couldn't put a gas boiler in, then
I mean, it's not what it says. Sorry.
no, exactly. I think it should be very clear that it's about that specific one category out of however many. And I think the wording then, if we recommend that we swap the wording round, we emphasise that we are looking at one specific category, the scoring in one specific category. But I would like to come back to Councillor Gascoigne's proposal that we recommend to Cabinet that we align with South Oxfordshire.
Yeah, but so what I'm hearing from people is that they don't like the wording that South Oxfordshire has used. But does that mean that you disagree with the principle that something that has gas heating should be 0? Because maybe in theory it would be anyway. Like, that's quite a big contribution to a house's carbon footprint, no?
Yeah, that's a sort of direct question to me. I don't think I do disagree with you, actually. No, I mean, I think it's the fact that we push them to using non-gas, even if they've applied with gas, which is the point that Councillor Paul made. But I wonder whether it would be possible for us to recommend, through you, Chair, of course, that there are conversations at South Oxfordshire about aligning wording, which actually meets all of our criteria. So we actually have a slightly better drafted thing, but it incorporates Councillor Gascoigne's and indeed your concern that gas heating should be discouraged before any project is agreed.
Yeah. So so I think possibly that's a oh, sorry,
That
Paul.
was sort of an amendment to the substantive motion,
Yeah.
I believe.
Paul, I'm conscious of time ticking on as well. So
Yeah, I just want to make one clarification on behalf of the councillors of South Oxfordshire. Obviously, this process is going through their scrutiny onto their cabinet as well. So their scrutiny meeting is next week, and they're having the opportunity to go through the same thing. So this isn't something that has been approved by them. This is an officer report that's coming to them in the same way that it's coming to you, and obviously they have the opportunity to change any wording that they should wish. I just wanted to make that clear, that this isn't wording on this particular issue isn't something that they have yet agreed. They're in the same position as you.
okay, perhaps then I could ask Adriana to clarify. Perhaps we can, as a scrutiny committee, if we're minded to recommend to our cabinet that we align with the principle of the South Oxfordshire wording, but that we think that we would like their scrutiny to make the wording better, to propose that they make the wording better. I'm not sure how we do this.
It's not scrutiny to make the wording better. So I was with you all the way. I would recommend that this scrutiny committee asks cabinet members to note the comments that you've made in relation to that specific wording, and that you ask the cabinet member to consider discussing with a counterpart South, aligning aligning the wording around the principles that gas options are not favoured by this council, and that's in line with your own position.
That was what I was trying to say.
I've noted down, so I'm hoping Candida did. She can repeat it back to you to make sure you're content as a committee.
Okay. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you ever so much, everybody. Right, let's move on. So we've got we're still on page 3. So financial appraisal, and that comes into page 11 as well. Any comments on that?
Perhaps it's a general comment that smaller applicants will probably find quite a lot of difficulty in meeting these criteria. I mean, again, major developers won't have any problem with it, but if somebody applied for just 2 or 3 houses, will they really want to go through this process or need to go through this process? Could be a sort of mini version for smaller applications.
Sorry, yeah. We do have a self-build officer who helps with self-build and very small things like that. It is obviously important that we, regardless of the size, if the amount of money is significant, it's important that we do all the work to make sure that the bid is properly and robustly assessed. As I touched on earlier, we are working with Coho Hub about helping those smaller organisations that maybe don't have all of the resources behind them to do these bids. So the point is completely well made. It is important that we're not just getting bids in from big RPs, but actually we don't want to stop smaller bidders from bidding, but we just need to make sure that they have the support that they need to make the bid, put the bid in properly and robustly.
Agreed.
Thank you, Paul. I think when you frame it phrases such as industry standard key performance indicators for a small CLT might be alarming. So so if you're working with Coho Hub to kind of guide people through and explain what that means in the context of a parish in Blueberry or wherever, that's great. So let's move on then to the scoring matrix. We've covered quite a lot of it already, I think, in general discussion. But is there any specific comments, Councillor Forder?
Councillor Gascoigne earlier pointed to the fact that there's no score, which actually is a pass or a fail in this, and I do understand the reason for that. But there is a little bit of opacity, I think, about the whole process at this point, because the first thing I wrote down when I put it here was moderation and appeal. Those are the 2 things. Now, if we go to paragraph 16, there is moderation of the scoring mechanism by the housing delivery manager and head of housing and environment. But what I don't quite understand is the result of this this scoring matrix shared with the applicant? Are they told whether it means it's likely to be a recommendation, positive or negative recommendation? And is there an opportunity for appeal? Because all of those 3 points would be normal, I would have thought, in a process like this, and none of them seem to be actually demonstrated in this so far.
Yes, I think paragraphs 20 to 24 make it clear that Cabinet will be provided with reports, and it's not necessarily clear what's going back to the applicant.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And what guidance is, and if they say, "Oh no, this isn't right at all," we don't agree. Can they go to someone else and have an external moderation, or are we just stuck with the internal moderation?
Paul, did you want to come back on that one?
Yeah. So as has been pointed out, the officers will assess. We will draft up a report. Obviously, before that report goes into the public domain, we would have talked to the bidders about what we're going to be recommending to council for councillors to decide on. But in terms of if they wish to appeal, ultimately the decision is made by councillors as to whether they want to award that bid. There isn't an external appeal process unless someone feels that the decision is wrong. Obviously, it can go through normal challenges to council process, but there isn't an external process because everything is upfront and transparent, and the decision isn't being made by officers; it is being made in the public domain by councillors.
Thank you very much. On that basis, I would suggest that there should be an additional step shown where it says that the report will be shared with the applicant, and the applicant will be given the opportunity to comment on the application before it is actually submitted, if that's possible.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are we happy for that one to go in our?
You'll be in the body of the minutes, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Roberts.
I've got a question on section 19, which is sort of once the grant funding, the discussion, it's a little bit woolly because it says that the way that it'll be paid will be in the grant fund agreement, kind of hinting that each grant fund agreement will be different. My question is that quite often when I've been dealing with these people, they find the architect's fee and the legal fees involved in getting as far as presenting this information quite difficult. And I'm wondering whether that can be in the sort of early stages or put right up front to being able for them to, because on the whole, when you're asking for all these things, are you expecting any kind of architect drawings when you're looking at these projects, or is this the stage before? But if you're going to be awarding a grant, you need to have a fairly clear idea of exactly what the building or what their proposal is. And I think up till now, we've always asked for architect's drawings and legal documents accompanying them. So yeah, my question is, are they being asked for? And if so, where is the funding coming for those?
So section 7 of the policy talks about what grant funding can be awarded for. It specifically doesn't say that we would pay for project development costs and the sort of costs that would be involved in bringing the bid forward. Because obviously that would be massive. That could massively open-end it and bring forward lots of bids that don't go anywhere, but we could end up financially supporting. And so yes, there is some commitment on the behalf of bidders, and part of that therefore ensures that what's coming forward is a genuine bid and has got some merit to it. What's required in terms of architects' drawings will depend on case by case. I don't know if there's any more I can say on that. I don't know whether we insist on something. That would be something I have to discuss with the relevant officers that would do the scoring, whether we ask for full architect's drawings.
It would be nice to know whether those sort of things are if the project is then moving forward, for those fees to be quite high up in the awarding of the grants, because you're saying it comes in phases, but that's often quite an expensive phase, and if that local group has managed to get the fees together to do that, then they find the next stage is even more difficult because they haven't got the money left because they've already done the fees. So yes, if it could be highlighted to make it in the graduation payment.
I think it's fair to expect people to make some commitment. I think I do. I accept what Paul's saying there.
Yeah. It's just it said it was in that they will pay the grant in phases.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they kind of thought exactly what phases will go for what.
That's about that's about the milestones.
Yeah. Yes, because it doesn't actually clearly say what milestones, and it just says that it'll be in the grant agreement.
Are there any other comments on page 6 of the policy, points 16 to 20, or on the final page of the policy? Councillor Porter.
Section 22. council provide indication timescale at this stage. I feel that's slightly imprecise, and I was hoping that I'd be able to have some precision in this, imprecision really, because going back to Councillor Hall's point, which has been strongly made on a number of occasions, how keen we are to encourage applicants. The first thing I'd want to know, if I was looking at this paper on the website, as I was thinking about making an application, is how long is it going to take? And when it says an indication timetable at this stage will be given, it would be nice if there could be some sort of idea of what sort of amount we're talking about. Are we talking about a month, or are we talking about 2 years, or, you know, what is the sort of the expectation? Now, I do understand, of course, that the actual length of time will depend on the quality of the application and how much work needs to be done and all that sort of stuff. But I was wondering whether it would be possible to manage expectations a little bit here, so people had a better idea of how long the process would take.
Yeah, if I can, again, this was deliberately worded so we would be expecting to talk to bidders at the point where they're thinking of putting in an application, so we could give them a very, very rough timetable. But we would only be able to give them something more detailed at the point in the process as outlined in 22, because obviously, for example, we've obviously just been through an election cycle. So if we're bids to come in at that point, there may be a period of time when those decisions couldn't get made, or there may be other factors that are happening. So, and also individual bids, some may be very straightforward, very simple. We can assess very quickly. We can put forward a report through the process very quickly, whereas others might take much more time to assess if they were big and complex bids that we might need to understand, and then how we align them with the democratic process. So as I mentioned earlier, the couple of bids that we've had often takes approximately 10 months to go from start of the bid through to the payments, but we're going to be able to give better indications at the time. I think if we put something hard and fast in here, the danger is that we would be in danger of falling foul of that, and we wouldn't want to set up those that might bid and give them false hope of a turnaround time if it's not something we can achieve.
Well, with respect, I think I would be nice, and I would completely understand if there was a time given and said this is subject to a whole number of issues that may arise. But I just do think that without sort of feeling incredibly strongly about it, that some sort of guidance would be helpful at the time when people are actually reading this paper on the website for the first time. And at the moment, it's completely open-ended. And I do understand that all the things that can go wrong, and sometimes it's very difficult to live up to expectations. But I would hope that a guide could be put there, and I wonder whether that could be considered as well, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. I think perhaps this is a broader comms issue that might be wanting to think about the website as a whole, is using kind of previous examples and saying, you know, this scheme came through this process and it took this many months from start to finish, and look what a wonderful scheme has resulted, and we've obviously got some excellent schemes that we could use. So that might be something we want to look at with the comms team, and as a general kind of about framing this application within the kind of broader website and making it attractive and making it feel possible to people before they even get to this. Perhaps.
Thank you for articulating your thought. My thoughts so much better for me.
Do we have comments on the application form as a whole? We've had a good go at the policy. I'm very conscious that South Oxfordshire are going to do exactly the same to you all next week, not to Councillor Call, but to the opposite. Do we have any comments on the planning, the application form as well?
I think on the application as a whole, my one query was, could the council itself be an applicant? And if the council was an applicant, would it use the same form?
Suzanne or Paul, do you have an answer for that question?
I think the answer, we'd obviously, we could use the same form. I think it would be very sensible if we as a council were going to look to build housing along this, that we followed our own policy. It would be it would be definitely remiss of us not to be working in the same way. Whether we would go through the same form and exactly the same process isn't something we've set out, but in principle, I think it would be the same. Yes.
Okay. Great. I think yeah, demonstrating good practice using your own form. Maybe you should be the first applicant to go through the process. Are there any other comments on the application form?
There's a quick clarification question. Because as we're looking at the form, it's like embedded in paper. What does it appear like to the people who are applying? Like, is it an online form, or is a Word document, or?
Yeah, at the moment we've got this set out simply as a printable out form. We'll obviously want to get a bit smarter that that's something that can be filled in electronically and sent in. So we've not, but the principle at this stage is just to get the principle of the process and the form, and then we can work through how we can get smarter comms as has been outlined by the committee.
Okay. Are there any other overarching questions? Now is your moment, or we forever hold our peace. I would just like to query, conscious of South Oxfordshire doing this as well, is the idea that we will still end up with one policy, albeit with potentially one or two differences. So what we're looking at is amalgamating our recommendations to the Cabinet. Is the plan that the Cabinets will work together to create one document that officers can work with?
Well, I will be having conversations with my counterpart on the South, and we will be discussing some of the issues that are raised, see where we can get some alignment.
Cool. Thank you very much, Councillor Ford. Could I perhaps come to our list of the kind of substantive points, because our job is to make recommendations to Cabinet, and I think we're probably at the point of the evening where we want to make sure that we articulate those.
And there were quite a few points made. Just so you know, the process would be after this meeting is that over the next day I'll be typing this all up. I'll be summarising it and emailing it to the Democratic Services Officer for Cabinet. He will then have a list of your shopping list, basically, that would be the Cabinet member to take away and discuss with their counterpart. I mean, do you want to go through it, or would you be happy for me to type it up and email you tomorrow?
I think it would be useful just to
want to go through it
in terms of the substantive, the kind of key points that we want to make, just to make sure that.
So, if I may go through my notes, but obviously pick up on anything you think I've missed. There was a mention of strengthening the wording on ring fencing. There was clarity requested for the wording on paragraphs 20 and 21. So this is the report aspect, isn't it? So wording to explain whether there's a finance limit or not for going to Cabinet. I think that was explained later in the meeting, but the wording wants some clarity there. So what's here? Sorry. Paragraphs 23 and 24. Clarity wanted. You asked if somebody asked if you could state that there has been no unspent money going back to developers. I think someone asked for that to be clear.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I think we got clarity on that. I'm not sure that's something we need to necessarily go back to wording.
Chair, is it only you who gets a copy of the draft, or is it circulated to?
My intention would be to summarise the committee's main points, and that goes to the DSO for Cabinet. And what he will do is read out that, and the Chair of Scrutiny would be welcome to attend and support that.
So we don't actually see what the paper that you actually send off to the DSO, is that correct?
Oh, well, it isn't a paper. It will just be a summary of what you've requested.
I think from my perspective, there were kind of 5 key points.
Yes, so we've also got I'm going down my notes and I've highlighted some parts. So we talked about having, the main one you talked about was having the gas boilers part, and about having a mirrored word, well, a similar wording to South. Yes, but you might want it to work together to get the right wording. Yes, there was some debate on whether it was quite the wording you'd like.
Excuse me.
There was one, Candida, about reference to the housing delivery strategy and strengthening what's required and what's desirable.
Yeah. And then I've got, can we add a line that applicants can comment on the results of the matrix? That one we need to put on the list as well. About that they get to see the result.
I think there was an additional step of explaining that a report would be shared with the applicant. Yeah, I think that was pretty key. Yeah. We would ask Cabinet to avoid undefined acronyms. So that's again about redrafting and finalising wording, I think. And then there was the point about the low running costs and making that a specific criteria that could be markable, because that's not just about zero carbon, that's also about water and other elements as well.
I didn't understand what added social value was. If it wasn't that.
Hey, do you feel like that captures your main points? Then I'll try and type up the minutes as soon as I can as well. I will be sending that summary tomorrow.
Paul.
Hello. Yeah, I captured, if I can help, I captured a few other things. I think you asked in paragraph 3 of the policy, just to clarify wording to say that this only applies to housing sums rather than anything else. Yes. And in paragraph 4, you asked to say that the delivery of affordable housing and that affordable housing in perpetuity was a requirement rather than just something where we've put where it should align to. And you've asked for clarification on acronyms throughout.
Yeah. Right, I think we have everything covered there that we substantively have talked about, and that we will be recommending to Cabinet. Obviously, we can't demand, we can make polite requests.
Be very bad tempered when they're not going out though, can't we?
We'll throw our teddies out of the pram afterwards. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Councillor Call, for joining us this evening. I appreciate it's been a long meeting, and you're very new to your position, so thank you ever so much for all your work on this. Thank you to Suzanne and to Paul for all of your answers and for the work that you guys and your team have been doing on this. And we look forward to this policy coming back to us in 12 months' time, hopefully with lots of lovely, shiny new schemes in process. And lots of money spent. So I have to sign the minutes. Otherwise, I think we can draw this meeting to a close and end the public live feed. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you very much.